Today, we're joined by Adam Swart, founder and CEO of Crowds on Demand, which is widely described as the original paid protesting and advocacy firm. For years, Adam has operated behind the scenes organizing demonstrations, rallies, and PR stunts and advocacy campaigns for clients across political and corporate spectrum. But now, as protest requests have reportedly surged dramatically, especially in the Washington, D.C. area, he's stepping forward publicly to explain how modern protests are organized, funded, and sometimes strategically choreographed for media impact. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Hey, it's such a pleasure to be with you, Paul, and your amazing audience.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Adam. So, the first question for you, Adam, is just for the audience, if they're not familiar, what exactly is Crowds on Demand and how do you define what you actually do?
So, Crowds on Demand is the original protesting company. We're the largest in the country. We're probably the best known in the country, and we probably have the best reputation in the country for organizing protests. But in addition to protests, we also organize PR stunts, advocacy campaigns, audience events. What I like to say is we're the sort of ultimate in publicity and perception and creating the right context behind something that is, behind an event, a campaign, a company, whatever it takes.
Right. Well, so I'm curious because there's a lot of things that go into there. There's a lot of sociology aspects as well. What
Yes.
can you tell? I'm actually not familiar. I'm curious about that. What did you study in school?
Well, so I studied political science and I
Okay.
studied French and I studied public policy. But I think certainly you get a sense in studying any of that, well, certainly political science, the importance of perception in anything. So the original idea of Crowds on Demand was to connect um essentially people who needed people at their event, whether it's a rally, campaign, company, whatever, with people to attend, right? It was simple
Right.
as we didn't do any strategy. It was just basically we're providing the bodies, right? And how did we provide that? Is I lived in, primarily I was going to UCLA at that time. So who did I use for those events? It was actors, out of work actors in
Mm,
LA. So this was 2012. So we're now all very familiar with the term gig economy, right? Like Uber
right.
drivers, DoorDash, whatever. But at the time, this was sort of a new thing. So, uh, but actors have always been in the gig economy because your work doing acting has always been hit or miss. So you always are looking for sort of flexible gigs on the side. So we really provided that.
Right.
Now, obviously, we have expanded to not just providing actors. It was in a way I almost feel like it was a mistake doing that originally because I've gotten so much bad press because it's like, okay, the press is like, oh, he puts actors at the protests, right?
Right.
So, which isn't strictly accurate now, even though it would have been accurate at one point.
Okay. All right. Well, that actually makes a lot of sense, especially the UCLA area. So that's what I was going to ask is how did you actually start this company and some of the connections that you made that made it successful? I mean, it's very difficult to start a company from the ground up. So what kind of influences or connections did you have to start this?
Well, you'd be surprised if I told you, but it's true that I had no connections when I started
Okay.
this company. So I had no existing customer base whatsoever. But I'll tell you what I did have, which was a general sense. I'd worked as a reporter, I'd worked on political campaigns, so I had a sense for how these things worked. So I knew how to get publicity, and I knew that the only way, considering I didn't have a huge advertising budget, the only way that I would get on the map was to get on the news, right? And I did, right? So because it was such a novel concept, I was like, well, why don't I just pitch this to the news media, let
Sure.
them know it's a thing, and then go from there. So within the first 3 months of starting the company, I was on Good Morning America discussing it. So, which at the time was a popular show. Um,
Right.
these days it's all about podcasts and social media, but at the time, like going on Good Morning America was a big deal. But
Sure.
obviously, I went on a bunch of other shows too. Um, and then it really grew from there because it was such a novel concept. And then how we expanded in many senses was due to what our clients needed, right? Because like I didn't initially start this company focused on providing strategic counsel. Why didn't I? Well, first of all, I was 21 when I was started the company. So no one wants to hire a 21-year-old for strategic counsel, right?
No.
So I wouldn't have been very successful in getting people to pay for my strategic counsel at 21. First of all, so the real kind of selling point at that point was, hey, I will provide you people for your events,
Right.
right? Um, as I grew and as we executed lots of successful campaigns, right? Everything from multi-billion-dollar investment disputes to multi-billion-dollar like cable carriage disputes to um issues of major headline making pharmaceutical stuff against the pharmaceutical industry,
Right.
the tech industry, right? We have now with a huge track record, people started saying, okay, not only do we want you to provide the people, but we also want your assistance, right? We want your counsel, right?
Okay.
In fact, I have sort of a side business where I actually provide people with counsel on how to defensively deal with kind of a protest type campaign,
That makes sense.
right? So because you can, if you're even moderately high profile, find yourself subjected to a protest campaign. And it's important that you understand how to respond, or in many cases, what not to do, right? In order to prevent that from escalating. Right.
Right.
So we're now using our experience. I've literally been doing this almost 14 years to try to kind of provide counsel to people as well. Not
Okay.
legal counsel, to be clear, I mean, advisory counsel.
Right. I understand that, and actually, all of that makes sense, especially how kind of the company has evolved as well. Let me just ask you about the structure of the company. So you're the CEO. Do you have like a board member, or I mean, how does your structure work?
Well, basically, here's how it works. So we have, there's me. My job is primarily to deal with our clients,
Okay.
uh, and not necessarily to execute events, right? I typically deal with clients, provide strategic guidance on how to execute events, and work with my team to make sure that they're executed properly, right? So, in terms of people that work with me, the main thing is that people need to do, right, that I have, are number one, vetting people, right? Because it might surprise your audience to know that we vet everyone who participates in any event, right? So
That is
we do
surprising,
is
actually.
people think like we're just like being like, oh, come out, like it doesn't matter. Like we're vetting you for two things primarily. Number one, that you're articulate. Number two, that you're passionate about the cause. Well, actually, three things. Sorry, I got that wrong.
Okay.
Articulate, passionate about the cause, and number three, and probably most importantly, that you're committed to our principles of legal, nonviolent, respectful advocacy,
Okay.
right? And there's so much misinformation out there online, like, oh, we're like paying random homeless people, our people don't know what they're doing, or worse, like actually we're doing stuff that's illegal. None of that is true. I'm a First Amendment absolutist. I love our beautiful First Amendment rights. Given that we have these First Amendment rights, I don't think you need to do anything illegal. The First Amendment gives us every tool we possibly could use. So
Right.
I don't need that, and I don't want that. So I actually strongly condemn anyone who's says that they're protesting and they're breaking the law, because you don't need to do that. Now, back to my team, we have so that's important. So we actually do a Zoom call, typically not even just a phone call, typically a Zoom call with each participant in each one of our events to
Oh,
make sure that they align with those principles. So that costs us money. By the way, this is something that I implemented about 6 or 7 years ago. Um, and it cost me money because my clients aren't willing to, I can't pass on all that cost to my clients. So it actually has taken away from my margins. So like we used to actually have bigger margins until we started doing this, and we actually have smaller margins now than we did 6 or 7 years ago for that reason. But it's worth it because it means that I can come on your show
Right.
and talk. And when people ask me about this business, I can say and look you in the eye and say, this is how we do things, and we're doing things properly. Right.
Right.
And so to me, it's worth it for my integrity to be able to tell you that. It's just one of those priceless things. Um, so that's one thing. The second thing is we have people who are executing events, right? And making sure that they go well. And like I try to stay up to date on all of our events, but these people, their job is to be on the ground and execute it.
Sure. So, and actually, that's very much so appreciated. I was curious though. I guess I could ask this question first. About on average from an event, how many? I guess I don't want to call them paid actors. I don't know what you call them, your clients, or I don't know. I don't know if that's your client or the people that you hire, to actually be part of the crowdsourcing. How on average, how many people are usually there for an event?
Uh, well, yeah, that's a great question. So participants, um, typically 50 to 100 is the average.
Okay.
So there's a lot of obviously also people think most of what we do is tens of thousands of people, right?
Right.
Sure, that's stuff that we've done thousands and thousands of people from time to time, but given the price, you can imagine that's pretty rare,
Yes.
right? It's like any business, right? Like you might have someone at a bakery who says, I want to order 100 cakes, but that's probably not your average order at the bakery, right? So I would put it at to this point. A lot of times people will actually come to us and say, I think I need 3,000, 5,000 people, and then we'll look at their budget and we'll look at their goals and
Hmm.
say, actually, what you want is 50 people or you want 100 people, right? And that might give you the best bang for your buck, right? Because the other thing you have to consider is on either side is ideally your goals should align with your budget, right? Um, and so if you're coming in and saying, "Hey, I want to stop this bill that's going through Congress," or I want to, or maybe even worse, I want to push a bill through Congress, and I want to create public support for that, and your budget is $50,000, I'd say that's probably not tenable, right?
Right.
If you have $50,000 budget and say, "Hey, I'm really concerned about this local issue and I want to stop this local development and I want to stop this local policy," that's probably more than enough in many cases to get that done, right? So it really depends on the budget.
Right. Well, so I'm curious again, because you mentioned before where some people have a perception of, oh, these are paid actors, crowdsourcing, they're just paying homeless people off the street to do these sorts of things. Um, you don't have to name specifically the organizations, but about how many uh, competitive organizations are there that do the same sort of work as you?
Well, Paul, it's not about competitive organizations. The part is that there are a lot of shadowy individuals and
Yeah.
maybe companies that don't advertise this service that are not doing it the right way. And I have no idea how many of them there are. I can
Okay.
tell when such people are involved because I see stuff like, for example, whoever was passing out tactical gear on the streets of LA, right?
Yeah.
Okay, someone bought that. That's not cheap, right? So someone bought that for a certain purpose, right?
Mm,
Um, people distributing bricks, right? That's not even cheap, right? So when you're making an illegal encampment and all the tents look like the same, right? So I those are indications someone's involved.
right.
Um, so yes, like these people are involved, but it's very important that I don't uh, accuse any individual person of illegal activity, even whereas you might suspect. Now, I have offered to our government to say that, look, I'm happy to lead a task force to crack down on illegal protests, right?
Right.
Because, like, as long as it's done in a nonpartisan way, I can help you root out how a lot of these riots are funded,
Sure.
and so I can help you with that. But thus far they have not been interested in that. I've offered to lead a committee on this, but my one condition was that this has to be nonpartisan, because I'm nonpartisan. I'm a political independent. I'm not a Democrat, not a Republican. So I'm not going to be a pawn in a political game.
Right.
I'm going to be looking at everybody for this, because that's important. So I've made that offer. I hope that they take me up on it, because I don't want money for it. I just want to be able to I want to be able to clean up this industry, and you need someone who is knowledgeable about how this works to do it, because
Yes.
a lot of the people out there, they don't really understand how this works. And how do I know they don't understand how this works? Because there's a lot of misinformation I see even from high level government officials about how this works.
Right. And I'm curious because I heard you on a previous interview as well. You were talking about proposing certain legislation to
Yes.
Congress for. Can you go into that for me?
Yeah, so there's two major policy proposals I have in addition to that offer. Number one, it's a Transparency in Political Demonstrations Act. What I want to do is every protest over 500 people, right, has to disclose who is funding it and who is receiving money, who are the vendors from it, right? So that could be me if I were my protest, but that could be a labor union, that could be a church group, right?
Right.
That could be um a March for Life, right? Like, it doesn't matter, but you're saying here's the organization, here are the vendors, right? And here is the net funder of it, right? Like, let's just say, I don't know, the Koch brothers, or Soros, or whatever, like,
Yeah.
if whatever the original funder is, right? So you have to disclose that. Now, people are asking, okay, well, Adam, why would you want to do this? Well, because there's so much misinformation, and there's so many people who are like, Adam, you should disclose what Crowds on Demand is doing. And I'm like, yeah, but the reality is, it's only fair if we all have to disclose everything,
That's
right?
true.
Over 500 people, because anything under 500 people is probably not, making national difference, right?
Right.
Um, so I proposed this. They haven't been receptive, unfortunately. But we'll see. So that's number one. Number two is I have what's called a Protesters' Bill of Rights and Responsibilities and Authorities' Bill of Rights and Responsibilities. So what that is that delineates, if you're a protester, right, these are the obligations, these are the rights you have, right? We're aware of our First Amendment rights to not only to demonstrate, but to demonstrate and be heard properly, right? Um, to actually not only be um not arrested, but to be facilitated, right?
Hmm.
In your right to expression, right? But you have the responsibility um of not blocking a street,
Right.
right? Obviously, nonviolence, coordinating with law enforcement, right? So there are rights and responsibilities. Same with law enforcement. Law enforcement has the responsibility to facilitate First Amendment expression, right? Even if they disagree with it, they have the responsibility to do it in a way that is non-partisan, right?
Right.
That you're a Republican sheriff, you have to treat a left-wing group the same as you would treat a right-wing group. And if you're a left-wing DA, you have to treat a left-wing group and a right-wing group the same. Doesn't matter, but that has not been done. And that is really concerning, because and we can get to um January 6th in a later on, but like, if you look at Black Lives Matter, January 6th, right? There's accusations on both sides, right? That the other side treats them partially, right?
Hmm.
Like, the left wing people say, "Oh, well, the right wing law enforcement treats us unfairly,"
Sure.
and the right wing people say the left wing law enforcement treats us unfairly. And my sense is all of those things are probably true, and that's unacceptable to me as a First Amendment absolutist. I like I am a ultra absolutist. Like, I think if a neo-Nazi should have the same right to protest as a MAGA, right? Why? Because that's the First Amendment right. I don't
Sure.
I can find someone detestable and still support their right, because I understand that ideology is inherently subjective. So if I start saying, oh, well, this person's hateful, so I don't want to hear them, well, tomorrow someone can say that my views are hateful.
Right. No, I understand that. And that, I mean, that's the heartbeat of the First Amendment. So I appreciate you saying that. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't actually come out and say that directly like that. So I agree with you. I mean, obviously, extreme ideologies or groups I don't agree with, but do
No.
I think that they should have a right to express their opinion? Sure. Why not? I mean,
Well,
that's
because they could tell someone could later tell you that you're extreme. That's the problem, is and that is a very uncomfortable thing. And
right.
that's why ACLU in the 60s defended the right of neo-Nazis to I don't know about neo-Nazis, Nazis to protest in front of a Jewish community called Skokie, Illinois, that was populated primarily by Holocaust survivors, right?
Right.
Um, so basically, and the lawyers for the ACLU in that case were primarily Jewish, right? So the point is, what they said basically is, if we can't essentially defend the most detestable people saying the most detestable things, then nothing is safe.
Right.
And
So
I said this to my British friends, like the laws that you see in Europe are very dangerous because they can be weaponized, by the wrong kind of leaders, right? And I would rather have to listen to people who I find detestable than, and by the way, I don't have to listen to them. No one says I have to pay attention.
sure.
They have the right to speak, I don't have to listen to them.
So let me ask you, Adam. And I'm sure that you have, but have you ever turned down a client or an organization because you thought that their agenda or their purpose was either deceptive or dangerous?
Yeah. Many times,
Many times.
more than I accept. So actually, this is interesting. So I'll tell you why I would not accept a client, right? And going from the most innocuous reasons to the more uh, like deeper reasons, right? So obviously, sometimes you just simply the budget doesn't match the ambition. That's
Right.
any company could have that, right? I want to stay at the Four Seasons and my budget is $50. Well, okay, you probably can't stay at the Four Seasons. Okay. Well, the second part is um the second one is I don't think it's going to be effective, right? So maybe they're not asking you to do anything illegal, but I don't think it's going to be effective. So I try to guide though in that case, I try to guide them toward an idea that would be effective, right? So I said no to some large protests around from sort of democratic groups because I felt that it was the same old, and it wasn't going to move the needle. And I was
Okay.
like, why do I want to take your money and embarrass myself, right? Um, and if you want to do something that holds accountable the failed promises of the current administration, there's a way to do that, but it has to be in a way that's persuasive. My
Mm.
feeling is that protest should be persuasive. You should be focused on saying, hey, you don't agree with me. So if you're doing protest for the left, you should say, okay, you're a Trump supporter or you voted for Trump. How do you convince that person that maybe they made a wrong decision? Yelling in their face, calling them racist, sexist, whatever, probably is not going to be that move, right?
Right.
So and similar on the other side, right? When you see pro-life people screaming at people going into an abortion clinic, I have not found that that has been a very effective tool, right? That often serves to just kind of make the person think, oh well, those guys. Oh, sorry, pardon my
Sure.
French.
No, it's
Um,
okay.
So, so what I find is persuasive advocacy, and that's a hallmark of the crowds on demand approach, is persuasive, respectful advocacy. So if someone's not interested in that, even if it's totally legal, I would prefer to like guide them in a different direction. So, okay, that's number two. Number three, um, you have causes that I just fundamentally disagree with, right? So now it's not for, I don't have to agree with you 100% in order to take your money, and to take your cause, right?
Mm.
So when I started working with the cryptocurrency industry about 7, 8 years ago, I didn't really know much about it. All I knew is that it seemed a little kind of fishy, but I was like, look, I don't understand this. This feels like pseudoscience a little bit, but what I
Yeah.
saw was that the banking industry was so united against it, and the financial industry and the government and everyone was so united at taking it down. And I was like, maybe these guys have a point that I can help them make. And I did. And we were very effective in that. And I'm not like a crypto bro in any case. Like I don't even own any cryptocurrency, but I do feel, and very much felt then, I still feel now that, hey, there are portions of the government and the financial system that are really like stacked against crypto.
Yeah.
And I that they deserve their day to speak. And so I was happy to help them speak. So it's an example of I don't have to 100% agree with you to say you should speak and I will help you do that. Right. But if it's something I consider horribly detestable, so for example, I mean, I mentioned neo-Nazi, like
Right.
I wouldn't work for that, right? Like, obviously, like, so a hate group, and again, I understand that hate is subjective. So this is Adam Swart's definition of what a hate group is. So I understand that that's my business. There's someone that might say working for an LGBT organization is hateful. So that's fine. That's their right to do that if they want to do that.
Sure.
If they don't want to work with an LGBT group. So everyone has a right um to decide with whom they want to associate. Um so the other kind of category that um I feel is a little concerning that I try not to work with is if you're going to put our guys in the middle of a really tense situation, right? Like, so let's just say you got situation with Antifa and Proud Boys, and
Yeah.
I don't know whether let's just say there's a situation and a client wants us to protest around that scene. I would respectfully decline because I'd be like, this is going to be crazy. Because you're going to have protests, counter protests. You're going to have authorities there who are going to have trouble distinguishing between who was peaceful and who was not. And when the tear gas gets unleashed,
Yeah.
it's going to be hard for us to be like, oh no, we're the guys that are just peacefully holding the signs. So it's put like part of how I've stayed in business for 13, 14 years and never had a single person get hurt, never had a single person get arrested. All that is because I'm pretty risk averse with those type of situations.
Sure. So, well, actually, a lot of things that you mentioned there make total sense to me, especially for somebody listening in, you have to understand what Adam's doing as well as, well, I'm not going to take on certain causes or protests or demonstrations if it's going to make my company look bad, right? Because you still got to understand the word of mouth, like, oh, this guy's really good with this, right? If you're looking for a cause and you've used Adam's company before, I mean, word of mouth is going to spread for the next person that wants a cause, right? So you're not going to take on something that's going to be a failure.
Exactly. And I like to be thought of as a principled person. Like, again, I work with conservative clients, I work with liberal clients, and I want them to all understand that like I am I'm not a mercenary. I have a set of principles. So I'm just sort of a common sense person. So like I would work on anti defund the police in Minneapolis because I think it's absurd what has been created in Minneapolis. There's just lawlessness, right?
Right.
So that is a quote unquote associated with a conservative movement, right?
Right.
Whereas if somebody said, hey, we need to stand up because big pharma is trying to increase the price of diabetes drugs, right? I would stand up to big pharma, and that's generally considered a liberal cause. So I don't consider it mutually exclusive. Like I'm not a liberal or conservative person, but I think that people on both sides respect me as a First Amendment absolutist, who will stand up and who will advocate for their cause, you know, and also kind of preserve the discretion that they are entitled to.
Right. Oh, and I appreciate that too, that you're a principled person. You don't want to take on something that you disagree with. Let me ask you something, Adam, as you mentioned about, the classic liberals screaming in somebody's face, or on the other side, Planned Parenthood demonstrations that don't usually end up in anything that comes out policy wise. However,
Yeah.
we did use those examples, and a lot of people are very familiar with those images. Do you think protests today are actually more about media optics than they are policy outcomes?
Yeah, but I think one can lead to another.
Right.
Um, I think that a lot of protests are staged for social media more than they were 10 years ago, or well, 13, 14 years ago when I started the business. Why? Because 14 years ago, you had Fox News on the right. I don't think you even had Newsmax 14 years ago.
I don't
You
think
had
so either.
Fox News on the right, and then you had the other news channels on the left, right? Um, and you had social media, which wasn't really like that political at the time, right? Now you have so many different little mini silos with which to amplify your specific cause, right? So if you're doing a liberal thing, you can amplify it on Blue Sky, right? Or on
Mhm.
Mastodon. These are the left-wing social networks. Or if you're doing something that is more like right-wing, that can be amplified on Twitter, or that can be amplified on one of the various niche shows, right? Like on Tucker, on Megyn Kelly,
Mhm.
on Mark Levin, or whatever, like depending on the specific thing, there's a very specific group of podcasters that support each particular goal that
Right.
might be very interested in amplifying a very specific message. And therefore, you have more avenues than you did before. Like it used to be, okay, I'm doing a protest in downtown Cleveland. I hope that the 5 o'clock news covers it, right? Which to some
Yeah.
extent you might, but to still, but you don't really care about the reason why you want the 5 o'clock news to cover it isn't because of the like 10 grandmas who are watching the 5 o'clock news. It's because the 5 o'clock news might have 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. And then from there, it'll be reposted. And then from there, it'll go viral to the extent that that's your goal. Right.
Right.
Um, but I will say, doing a lot of protests, I handle a lot of protests where the goal is not to get in the media. So, um, you'd be surprised like how many protests that we do where the goal is actually more to reach a specific audience than to do the media. Um, so yes, we do plenty where the goal is okay, get as many clicks and views as possible.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that, hey, especially on local matters, that you don't even need media coverage to start getting an impact on.
Well, so I wanted to say something though, Adam. There's actually 11 grandmas that watch 5 o'clock news because I am the 11th grandmother. But yeah, I understand that. Yeah, there's a lot of. I guess it just depends on what you're actually trying to achieve. As far as yeah, if you wanted to be on left wing media or whatever, right wing media or 5 o'clock news as well. I mean, there's just different purposes, so that makes a lot of sense to me. There's one thing again with optics though, um, and every time that I see this in a protest, I automatically think that they're paid actors or participants. When people are wearing masks at protests, is that usually an organic thing, or is that a strategic thing, or is that a telltale sign?
Okay, well, I have a couple of reactions to that. So, number one is the only time we've ever worn masks at protests is during like crowds on demand. People have ever been allowed to wear masks is during the pandemic. We said if you want to wear a mask, you can
That
like
makes sense.
do so, right? But that was a kind of I mean, even though it was only a couple of years ago, it feels like a very different time. But the um there's a good reason and a bad reason for to wear a mask at a protest. So the good reason is you have the right. So the bad reason, sorry, I'll give you the bad reason first. The bad reason is because you want to do something illegal and you don't want to be caught,
Yes.
right? So that is a bad reason because then you do something illegal and it's very hard to find out who did it because you're in a mask. Okay, bad. Here's the good reason. The Supreme Court has regularly affirmed the right to what's called anonymous free speech, right? So that means you can have a Twitter handle that is not tied to your name, right? And you have the ability to speak with that Twitter handle and not have that come back to you, right?
Yes.
Why is that important? Right. Well, we live in an era of cancel culture, right? cancel culture. So we saw people in the Biden administration in the post BLM era get fired. There's like a professor who said, "Oh, well, I don't know about the tactics of Black Lives Matter." Fired, right? You'd have people who would like criticize, say, "Oh, well, I don't think we should replace a statue of Thomas Jefferson with a statue of a Black Panther." Fired, right? Like, this is called cancel culture, right?
Right.
Now we see cancel culture on the other side, right? Where people are saying, "Oh, I oppose Israel's war in Gaza." Oh, fired, right?
Yeah.
So this is bad. This is bad. And I oppose cancel culture on all sides. So I think there's been a lot of hypocrisy on both sides about this, but I've to your listeners, go look back. I've been opposing cancel culture from the left and from the right. So back to the masks. I think it's I think here's what I define cancel culture as. In one part is the idea that somebody not a high level person can be held accountable for something that's done in a personal capacity. So if you're the
Right.
CEO of American Airlines and you
Yeah.
make a controversial political statement, I think it's reasonable for you to be held accountable for that statement because you are a high profile public facing person. But if you are an American Airlines flight attendant and you say something like support Israel or support Palestine, right, in your private Instagram account
Mm-hmm.
on your own time, you don't represent American Airlines, right? Why should you be fired for that? Like, people, I don't want to call out American Airlines specifically, but
Right. I
I'm just giving
understand.
that as a hypothetical. Whereas what does it matter if the flight attendant supports Israel or supports Palestine in the course of their duties, provided that they're committed to doing their duties professionally, right? Or a UPS driver or a FedEx driver or a Starbucks barista, right? I understand. I totally respect. I don't want anybody wearing any flag pins other than the American flag pin at their job. But I'm
Yes.
saying, if you are a Starbucks barista and you go to a pro-life demonstration, you may worry that you will experience severe consequences professionally for going to that demonstration.
Mm.
And why should you? Why should the so there's a value, in my opinion, of saying, yes, you can wear a mask, because you shouldn't be, essentially, the price of First Amendment expression should not be losing your career. You know what I
Right.
mean? I mean, I even had this a whole discussion of okay, so there's have you heard the term the Overton window?
No, I
Basically, the
have not.
window is it refers to sort of the range of acceptable political discourse, right? So like being a Nazi is like outside the Overton window, or like, I don't know, being a Marxist theocrat is outside the Overton window. So
Okay.
the window always changes. So it might be here, whatever. So the point is that I take the more radical belief that I don't care. Like if the UPS driver is like a Marxist, like, or a Nazi, as long as that doesn't affect their work, they should be allowed to have their opinion in their
Sure.
personal life. You know
Right.
what I mean? I could disagree with it, but like, why should they? But like, if the CEO of UPS is a Nazi, that's not okay, right? Because that's a high profile, that's a public facing role. Whereas the UPS driver, if the UPS driver has views that I find reprehensible, why should they be fired from UPS if they're not expressing those views at work and they're otherwise professional at work? So the reason why I do say having people wear masks at protests, provided they're just doing so to have the right to speak, not to as a cover for illegal activity, should be acceptable.
Right. No, I do understand that. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into what you were just saying as well. I think I used to be active duty, and then I worked for the government as well. And part of the, I guess, outlines of doing that type of work is, hey, don't maintain a social media presence for active duty anyway, for sure.
That's
Don't
very
maintain a social media presence, and with whatever sort of political um, views or aspirations or protests or whatever you have, which for the government makes more sense, but kind of sort of it does make more sense because you're a public facing figure that you represent this organization and the country. I think some of that has spilled over into the private sector as well. Well, hey, you're an employee of this company, you represent
It's
us,
gone
so
too far low. It's gone too low in terms of who should be subjected to those higher standards. I guess that's my point. That's my
right.
is that like I totally respect that a CEO of a Fortune 500 company or even a smaller company. I mean, when I speak publicly, I understand that people will critique me for my views. Now, no one can fire me because I'm the CEO, but
Right.
but clients can decide if they don't like what I have to say that they don't want to work with me, right?
Yes.
My challenge is that like I think it's gone to like now airlines are saying, oh well, flight attendants or pilots can't say different things, or like I said, a UPS driver or a barista, a Home Depot worker. These are people who are not in positions of huge power. So to
Sure.
the now, okay,
For the
hypothetically,
company.
if you have a flight attendant who says, I would not serve this group of people on my aircraft, well, okay, that's a problem. That's not professional. But to
Mm,
say, hey, should a flight attendant be allowed their political views and to be allowed to express them within their private social media
yes.
group? I feel like the answer is yes. Same with a teacher. Like as long as it's not as long as it's clear that they're going to be doing their work professionally. And I know a lot of people who are very politically interested, and when it comes to work, they don't they do what the work says, you know what I mean?
Right. No, I agree with you 1000%. Yeah, you should definitely have, again, First Amendment rights. But yeah, it's the time and place. You don't do it on the clock for
Not on the
whatever.
clock. Absolutely not on the clock.
Right.
So I oppose what I think is probably not okay is there have been things of like a Starbucks barista has a Palestine pin. Like I don't think that's appropriate any more than having an Israel pin is
I
appropriate,
agree.
because I think you're injecting. I mean, in a way, it shouldn't be a thing. Like, hey, if you're Palestinian or you're Israeli, in a way, that's fine. But now understanding that those symbols have become political symbols, they become a distraction from the job, right? So okay,
Right.
maybe don't have those on the job, but at any rate, I apologize for digressing, but I'm
No,
such an
you're
opponent
good.
of cancel culture that I think it's important that people understand that cancel culture has just gone too far, and that that I don't want like just ordinary American workers feeling like they have to censor themselves because they're going to get fired if they don't.
Absolutely. I agree. Let me ask you, Adam, and I think I heard a response from you before, but maybe you can refresh me and the audience because they probably haven't heard it. Do you think that, um, and this probably goes against everything that you stand for anyway, but do you think that paid protests undermine authentic grassroots movements?
Well, I think that my answer to this is that all movements have a lot of money behind it, including the movements that you agree with. Like, not you, Paul, but you, anybody, right?
Sure.
Gay rights, civil rights, the pro-life movement, the pro-choice movement, the MAGA, the Tea Party, they all have massive billionaires behind them, right? Sometimes multiple. They have tons of donations, tons of money, right? That's how they got on the map. And there's a lot of actually great causes, by the way, that have never gotten on the map because they have never gotten funding to do,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So the thing is that the reality is you need money, and what's called prime the pump. What Crowds on Demand does, I always say, is we're a catalyst, right? What we do is I can't make an unpopular movement popular. That would actually be giving me way too much credit. What I can do
Yes.
is put a movement on the map, and then from there, if it's catchy, it'll catch on, right? So great example. So the Tea Party, funded by the Koch brothers and other conservative billionaires, right? But the Tea Party was nothing before these guys started funding it, right? But they had good publicists. They had the guys in the tricolor Revolutionary War garb, right? But it started as like
Yeah.
50 people like in there, but then they had good publicists and they were on Fox News and it grew, right? Why?
Yeah.
Because people liked the movement. But if the Koch brothers and all the other billionaires hadn't put the money in it, it just would have never grown. It would have fizzled, right? Um, Conversely, look at Jeb Bush or Michael Bloomberg, right? These guys had hundreds of millions of dollars in their failed, pathetic campaigns. Why?
Mm.
Because no one liked what they had to say. Everybody knew who Michael Bloomberg was. Everybody knew who Jeb Bush was. People did not like what they had to say. So they could spend they could have spent 10 times what they spent and they would have still lost, right? I don't think either of them won a single state, if I'm not mistaken, right? They both ran just pathetic campaigns. They were both pathetic candidates, right? So why?
Yeah.
I mean, truly, like it's embarrassing, right? Like I would be embarrassed to be their family member, like having seen such a bad, um, you know, um, but it's like this is the thing is that so money doesn't buy you everything. Money will get you visibility, but ultimately the message has to be good. So sometimes I feel like my critics online will overstate my influence, like to say, oh, well, he's creating these movements out of nothing. It's like, I don't have the capacity to do that. I can
Right.
now, the more funding I have, the more I can try to keep marketing and keep trying different strategies to make it resonate with people. Right.
Yes.
So yes, I don't disagree that money will help. So if I have a small budget, I might have one chance. If I have a larger budget, I can try like 10 different messages in, 50 different cities and see what works. But at the end of the day, if it's an unpopular message, such as Bloomberg or such as Jeb Bush, right? It doesn't matter. Like there's nothing you can do to make those guys sexy, right?
Right.
Um, so ultimately, um, I don't so I guess the answer to your question is no, it doesn't undermine it. It actually helps get good movements off the ground. There's actually like one movement that's kind of an interesting one that I feel like has not gotten any steam because it has such a bad connotation is there've been a lot of clients that have had issues where their fathers um who have been denied visitation with their children.
Mm.
Um, and this is an issue that is like an issue that I've just seen in my work because we've kind of taken on a lot of these campaigns on an individual basis, but because the court system, the family court system is so biased sort of against a lot of dads,
Yes.
right? Because this no one wants to fund a broader movement on this because it has this like connotation of, oh, you're anti-women, you're misogynistic, you're whatever, right? So as a result, every attempt to create that movement that I've seen, not been a part of, but seen has fizzled, right? So that's a great example of a movement that is actually like potentially a worthy cause, but that has not ever gotten a significant amount of funding and therefore has languished in obscurity. Right.
Right.
So my point is there's a lot of good movements that languish in obscurity and a lot of um and but you can't really market like I mean look at another great Kamala Harris, right? Like she raised tons of money, but she was ultimately like a very bad candidate. If you just wrote instead of Kamala Harris, you wrote Adam Swart and then parentheses D, I would have won more states than her and not no without any campaigning whatsoever. You know
No,
what I
for
mean?
sure.
So and we could have wrote anyone's name in the world and she was just a very bad candidate. So the point is make you can't essentially force a bad cause on people or it's very hard to do that.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah, you can't roll out, Kamala Harris, yeah, Jeb Wood, yeah. it has to be something that's going to resonate with people, which, obviously you're all too familiar with when you take on certain clients of, I don't think that's going to work, or
Yeah, and that's part of it is like, I don't wanna create a situation where they're mad at me for not succeeding when so I'd rather define the terms before the start of the engagement.
right. So let me ask you, Adam. So I wanted to get to a controversial topic
Yeah.
of January 6th. So what are your views on the claims that major protests, including events like January 6th, were
Mhm.
orchestrated or manipulated?
I think more likely manipulated than orchestrated.
Okay.
First of all, it's possible. First of all, let me just say I condemn it. I condemn if it does. I condemn. Let me just say this: I condemn the principle of what's called entrapment. Right. So what this is something that they did under the Bush administration with Muslims. They did under the Biden administration with conservatives. So entrapment is basically like this is the principle. You take some low IQ person, right? They're always it seems always targeted at people who are like low IQ,
Yeah.
and maybe they say some dumb, pardon my language, dumb stuff online. Um, you know, and then a undercover agent approaches them and tries to and further radicalizes them. And these
Yes.
people are already kind of dumb, so they're impressionable, and they radicalize them, and then they offer to sell them weapons for some sort of thing that they talked them into, and then they arrest them. And then they act like they just foiled some massive plan, which wouldn't have been a plan if they hadn't done it. You see
Yes.
what I'm saying? So I harshly condemn the practice. So without opining on a specific incident, I think it's important that I harshly condemn this practice because it's important. Like, I have utmost respect for our law enforcement. I'm pro law enforcement. I oppose defunding the police or federal law enforcement. But I think that it's important to have undercover agents in groups that could be seditious. I completely agree. But what seems to have happened is that they seem to have, in a rush to try to make a breakthrough, they try to they try to push these things along instead of just stay silent, and if they see something bad, then they make an arrest. If you see the difference, right?
Yeah.
So I really oppose. So to the extent that any kind of federal operative was trying to push people to be more violent and to be more aggressive, that is a huge problem, and that I couldn't condemn it more. Um, I don't I'm not an expert on that, but I know that if that is happening, I think that is awful.
Right. Well, I also want to ask you to, uh, uh, Pastor Paul and I, we did a segment where it was just us before, and we were talking about the No Kings protest rallies, and
Yeah.
I make fun of them because the times that I've seen them go by, it looks totally like paid for, and there's not really anything out of it, and a lot of times it seems like there was a that the protests happen as a response or distraction from something successful that President Trump had done. Is your organization involved with the No Kings rallies?
Well, I'll put it this way. I don't think they're effective. So that's my concern with it is, first of all, I think it's important. Like, I will say, and I've said this to my conservative friends, is like, look, obviously you can make fun of them, that's fine, but recognize when someone's also right to peaceful expression. So,
Yeah.
like, to the extent that they're being peaceful, that's great. Do I think they're very effective? No. How do I know they're not effective? The polls haven't really changed, and um the um the messaging is not aimed at persuading people. Why is this such a bad idea? Well, Democrats have a pretty awesome opportunity right now to persuade conservatives to join the movement, right? Why?
Yeah.
Because of two major failed promises: the Forever Wars and the Epstein files, right?
Mm.
There's been literally, like, this is like embarrassing, right? The Trump said no forever wars, and he's literally saying, "Oh, we might even send ground troops to Iran," right? That sounds like a forever war, right? The Venezuela, Ecuador. right? This is a complete breaking of the promises that he ran on,
Right.
right? Number one, obviously the Epstein, right, is now it's clear that he and Biden, in fairness, were protecting the donor class, right? I mean, you see on that list an almost equal mix of Republican and Democratic billionaires, right? And you see why Biden didn't release it, and you see why Trump didn't release it.
Mm.
But I think this is an opportunity for Democrats to appeal. The problem is that culturally they have very little in common with the MAGA base. So this is the challenge: is you have people like Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene and I mean, even on the more kind of fringe level, like a Fuentes type people who are now basically saying WTF, right?
Yeah.
Um, are Democrats going to be able to take advantage of the fact that there is a fissure in the Republican coalition or not? And this is the challenge. I have some thoughts on it, but the Democrats always seem to be the masters at screwing these things up because they just like the they get too focused on cultural issues rather than saying, okay, let's make common cause with people who might disagree with us on everything else.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's evidence from the last two candidates that they put up for president as well. Um,
Yeah.
so, what do you? So, there's been a reported 400% surge for calls for demonstrations and protests. What do you think is driving this reported spike in protests for this year?
Well, I think the spike is an increasing degree of activism among people. I think now 400% request doesn't mean 400% increase in bookings because as I went over earlier, I don't
Yeah.
accept all the requests. But the I think what is underlying this is the fact that more and more people, especially wealthy people, are getting very engaged
Mm.
in activism, right? On the right, on the left. It used to be that a lot of people would be like, I'm a business person. I don't really do politics. I vote every 2 years, 4 years, whatever, and that's it. And now you're seeing billionaires and wealthy people and groups and companies feeling like they have to get involved. Why? Because if they don't get involved, their competitor is getting involved and will undercut them. Right.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think this is a good thing about America because I think the one of the beauties of a free market system is that a company can basically make a good product and just not get involved in politics. So the fact that all these companies are getting involved is kind of a sign that, hey, we're becoming like so political. But on
Right.
the other hand, like, hey, it is what it is, and I that's what I would attribute it to.
And so, Adam, why? I don't see anybody else that's a CEO or involved with any of these organizations that do organizations for crowdsourcing or protesting, um, publicly facing, except for you. Why are you choosing to speak out publicly now?
Well, first of all, out of enlightened self-interest. So there's so much misinformation that if I don't go out there and go on like programs, then people will only believe misinformation. And I want people to
Yes.
hear from me directly. Now, you could like me, dislike me, you could agree with half of what I said, that's fine. You could disagree with the other half. But first of all, to be out there to rebut the misinformation, to make the case for what we do as ethical, right? Which I sort of we talked about, right? And also to condemn the bad actors and to tell them not only are they doing something illegal, but they're not even serving their cause. So those are sort of the three reasons I'm here. I guess lastly, it's to tell you the cause that I'm most interested in, which is making our cities better through ending the defund the police nonsense,
Mm.
making our cities into urban paradises, right? But like we can do it. Our cities have been allowed to decline, and I want to work on ways to rejuvenate our cities. Taking on fast food and big pharma. These are killer companies that have like very much hurt America and have not really suffered the consequences. You saw You saw that video of the McDonald's CEO, like he can't even eat his own burger. You know what I mean? Because it's so freaking disgusting. Because he has contempt for his customers. I can tell it that he laughs at his customers. He thinks his customers are roots, right? So he really does. And number three, big tech. I want to take on big tech. These tech monopolies have, and particularly and I'm referring to social media monopolies,
Yeah.
have become so dangerous, and it is critical that we rein them in, because if we don't, they're only going to get more powerful. They know everything about us. They know how to manipulate us. I'm sure all your listeners know people who have just gone completely mad on the right or on the left or both through social media. Like, this is a danger and we need to wake up. So those are the causes I'm most interested in. Obviously, we'll take on other things, but those are probably the ones that I find the most interesting.
Wow. Well, yeah, and I think this has been a fascinating conversation, and I agree. I think pretty much with almost everything that you said. Like, we're pretty much in line with that. I mean, we're obviously in different lines of work, but I'm happy to be able to hear you express your opinion and tell us more about kind of the things that go on. You know, a lot of the things that people see, unfortunately, now, because social media is so big, like, um, is little clips, little sound bites, or, you know, the optics from different demonstrations, and that kind of shapes people's perspectives and their own political narratives, and whatever the algorithm is that they're watching as well, it takes them down deeper and deeper and deeper into a rabbit hole, and then unfortunately sometimes radicalizes them into ideas and ideologies that they never thought that they probably were going to be a
And
part of.
social media facilitates that. Social media
Exactly.
facilitates that. That's the problem, is that if you're a little bit radical, it'll take you down that hole. They know how to exploit you. They know the psychology. It's worse than a casino. It's worse than fast food. It's as bad as becoming it'll drive you to drug addiction sometimes. Like truly, it's one of the most dangerous things. And if we don't rein it in, then it will take us over. Um, and I don't mean to sound apocalyptic, but it is one of the biggest threats to this country right now. And I'm referring to all of the social media networks when I talk about this.
Right. Well, Adam, I just want to say it's been fascinating and an eye-opening conversation. Whether someone
It's been
agrees with your industry or questions it, understanding how modern protests are organized is critical in a media-driven age. Conversations like this challenge people to think more critically about what they see on the news and on social media. For those who want to learn more about Adam Swart and Crowds on Demand, visit crowdsondemand.com and also follow Adam on X for ongoing commentary. We'll include all the links below in the show notes. Adam, I just want to say thank you again for being here with us today and for pulling back the curtain and joining us.
It's been a pleasure. Great to be with you and your audience.
Thanks, Adam.